Ask almost anyone when China's economic miracle began, and you will get the exact same answer, 1978. That date is anchored to a very specific story. In the popular narrative, Deng Xiaoping took power and flipped the nation's switch from isolation to global integration by himself. But political analyst Ho Pin argues that this standard history is incomplete. In his program Today's Focus, Ho Pin presents a different framework for understanding how immense nations actually pivot. History rarely turns on a single moment. Ho Pin argues that to find the actual starting line of China's opening, we have to rewind the clock 6 years earlier, to 1972. Watch this timeline push back. The transformation of the 1970s was a slow simmer driven by 3 parallel tracks working at the exact same time: shifting external geopolitics, the reorganization of elite power, and desperate grassroots survival experiments. Relying on the 1978 myth is risky. It hides the messy, multi-layered mechanics required to alter the trajectory of a billion-person country. Prior to 1972, China operated in a state of severe geopolitical isolation. Without a connection to global markets or technology, any attempt at internal reform lacked the tools needed to survive. The first opening in that Cold War wall happened here. Richard Nixon's 1972 visit to Beijing broke the ice. That diplomatic shift allowed previously banned concepts, like Western technology, academic exchange, and international trade, to slowly re-enter the consciousness of the Chinese political elite. While the international door cracked open, the internal political landscape needed repair. In the mid-1970s, Premier Zhou Enlai began quietly reconstructing the country's domestic order. Zhou resurrected a strategy known as the 4 modernizations. It served as a practical cover to rebuild the administrative state, pulling purged engineers, scientists, and professional experts back into government roles. By 1975, Deng Xiaoping briefly returned to power to assist in this stabilization. For the first time in years, the national focus began moving away from political purges and toward pragmatic, everyday economic construction. Ho Pin frames this era as a mandatory warm-up phase. The state was stockpiling the bureaucratic talent and international space needed to manage the coming transitions. Standard historical accounts often dismiss Hua Guofeng as a conservative placeholder who briefly held power after Mao. Ho Pin's analysis moves past that dismissal. Hua was a necessary stabilizer. By orchestrating the arrest of the Gang of Four in 1976, he prevented state collapse and maintained the baseline political order required for any future policy change. He also spearheaded a massive importation of Western industrial equipment. This policy, often called the Foreign Leap Forward, officially ended isolationist dogma. China was openly buying foreign technology again. Then came the ideological bottleneck of 1977. Hu Yaobang initiated a nationwide debate on the truth standard, arguing that if a policy didn't work in practice, it should be abandoned regardless of dogma. This shift in logic allowed the government to finally pivot away from rigid political theory. While Beijing debated ideology, local provincial leaders were dealing with a desperate reality. Millions of people were barely surviving. Leaders like Zhao Ziyang in Sichuan and Wan Li in Anhui began quietly permitting agricultural responsibility systems. These illicit, localized experiments were born from a need to prevent starvation, not from a master plan drafted in the capital. These 3 forces, Hua Guofeng's stability, Hu Yaobang's ideological cover, and local leaders breaking the law to feed people, created an irreversible groundswell that forced the central government to officially change course. Now we return to the famous pivot point of 1978, but we see it through the 6 years of groundwork that preceded it. Ho Pin's analysis recontextualizes Deng Xiaoping's role. Deng stabilized the rhythm and finalized the direction of a momentum that had been building for years. This diagram shows how those 3 tiers synchronized: the diplomacy of 1972, the political reshuffle of 1976, and the grassroots experiments finally interlocked to drive the state machine forward. That synchronization visibly shifted the nation's focus. The era of constant political struggle was ending. Everyday economic normalcy had returned to the streets. Explaining massive historical shifts through a great man theory is factually incomplete. It ignores the complex reality of how systemic evolution actually occurs. National transformation emerges from the collaborative alignment of global space, political stability, and local desperation. These are the components that actually change a country's fate.